Welcome to the news for the week of 24 May 2020. It's officially summer since Memorial Day sort of happened and has happened. Defcon is canceled. Cyber insurance, maybe. Phishing, of course. Rogue drones. The return of the dark web. Sarwent and Dutch grandmothers in trouble. All this and Jason Wood on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the countless ways our critical systems can be put in jeopardy. Ransomware attacks, misconfiguration, user error, and malicious threat actors, to name a few. As IT infrastructures continue to grow and diversify, how do you ensure stable security? Core Security, a help systems company, provides an analytics-driven, layered approach to security with a portfolio that enables both proactive and reactive responses. With Core Security, you can reduce risk by limiting access, detect upcoming and active threats, test for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitor data for actionable insights. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/core security.
Well, my hair is getting longer and Leon's getting larger. So if you don't get that reference, sorry. It did happen. I've reported this before. I'll keep reporting it for a little while. DEF CON is canceled. Just wanted to let you know. I put that up again just because for so long it's been a joke. But, due to the chaos, and on and on and on. We've said it all before. Sad face. This is the last DEF CON is canceled t-shirt that I have. So unless DT wants to send me some more DEF CON is canceled t-shirts, I'm not gonna put any more. Hint. But okay. In the first story, a company called RealPage, which is based in Texas, runs a rent service portal. So this is a place where you go and you can pay your rent, and I guess renters can pay their rent, renters can collect their rents, and rentees can pay their rents and so forth. In 2018, they got phished, and they basically lost about $10 million due to credential stuffing. So the phishing attack, credential stuffing, usual suspect. About $6 million was recovered somehow. It didn't say how they got the money back, but somehow they got $6 million of this money back. So somebody logged in and they started transferring money out to other sources. But the point of the story, the company filed an insurance claim on their cyber insurance policy. Now, this policy covered losses, and there's a whole bunch of fine print you can read if you want to. I put the link to the court case and the story, so you can go read the whole thing if you want to. But the point reason I put this in was the bottom line of this case was that the insurance company refused to pay. The case itself is called RealPage National Union versus National Union Fire Insurance Company of Pittsburgh and Beasley Insurance. That's, boy, what a name. The refusal of the insurance company centered around the idea that, one, cyber is not really a thing, even though they were selling cyber policies. But basically what they said was that cyber insurance, and this is, of course, in reference to this particular policy, so it doesn't necessarily mean your policy, but their cyber insurance policy was what they called a fidelity bond. And they said basically the only thing it actually covered were the actions of a trusted employee. So it was an outside attacker, an outside agent. Therefore, it was not a cyber fidelity bond coverage. But the court, the court heard the lawsuit, and they allowed this lawsuit to proceed. So it's not been resolved. The reason I brought it up for all of us was that you may want to review your cyber policies and ensure that your policy actually does what you think it does. Because I actually asked some people about their policies, and every one of them said the same thing. I just asked, and I didn't do a formal survey or anything like that. But so it's one of those, a lot of people say, but it was one of those things where I called some people I knew and I was like, what does your cyber policy cover? And they almost all said that it did cover phishing attacks and other hacking attacks and things like that. And I asked them, did they know that for sure, or was it a fidelity bond? And they said, I don't know what a fidelity bond is. So might be a good, this is a good example of marketing using the word cyber a lot, but in reality, the coverage was supposed to be something else, what I call a surety bond, but they were calling it a fidelity bond, so I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. But so you might want to check that out and read all your fine print. I put this next story in just to give you a starting point and a mention about price gouging and fraud. I know all of us know a lot about price gouging and fraud and scams and all these things, but you might want to get some info out to all your people about this particular kind of thing. And I know Paul was talking about this on Security Weekly last week about price gouging. Basically, it's an old scam. I mean, if there's something people are worried about, it's buy low, sell high kind of thing. Is it illegal? It's hard to say. But basically, this story was about people selling webcams for inflated prices and complaints on Amazon and other sites about purchasing things that they thought they needed. So I was talking to some people and I was saying, did you recommend to your employees that they buy stuff? And they were like, oh yeah, we recommended they purchase a webcam if they didn't have one, and on and on and on. And I was thinking, wow, how many people jumped on Amazon and thought, a Logitech 1080 webcam, say 3 generations old, sold for $400 and just bought it? So some of these are just straight up scams. Where they list one product or they put up a picture of a product. I've seen these. They put up a picture of one thing, and what you're actually buying, if you read the description, is something completely different from that. That's a common scam, and it's not illegal really, but there's a lot of price gouging. So where they just literally are selling products that I know what the price used to be, and I go look at it on there and go, wow, I cannot believe they're trying to sell this webcam that cost $107 for $400. And you can talk about supply and demand and all the politics of it or whatever, but you might actually want to think about stuff you're recommending to your employees. And recommend to them a price at the same time, because if you're saying you should purchase this particular product or this particular laptop because it's secure or whatever, and your people don't have any real expertise in this, and they jump online and they think they're buying a Logitech webcam and they end up getting a Lomatech or something weird like that, and it costs $400, you might want to give them a little bit of guidance and warning about that going forward. Immuniweb has unveiled a free tool, and I'll put free in quotes. It was free, but it requires you to register, but we all know about that. But a free tool that apparently allows businesses and governments to check the dark web exposure of their domain. So this free test, of course, is encouraging you while you're waiting on your test to run to use their services and subscribe to their attack surface management tool. And then, of course, once the wait ends, it immediately says log in to get your results, which I was expecting. Basically, this is sort of an interesting thought. A lot of companies have started moving towards trying to find ways to collect intel off of the dark web because there's sort of this fear of, chatter on the dark web, a la the CIA, KGB kind of stuff. This has been going on for 3 or 4 years. I've been seeing companies, and I'm not disparaging any of those companies that are doing this, but I've just seen a lot of chatter about collecting intelligence on the dark web and selling that to you and so forth. And I won't get into whether, what I think about it. There's always been a lot of controversy about it and about whether it was worth your time. Because the cost of such activities, really have to be weighed against the value of the information received. When I used to work for a bank, they did not put undercover operatives out in local crime dens to listen in or hear if people were, shooting pool and talking about robbing any of the banks around there. I guess. Maybe they did. I don't know, but I never heard of anything like that. I did include another story about that as well that was essentially called, is it worth getting involved in this kind of dark web intelligence for that? A SAN study finds that organizations are facing common challenges when it comes to threat hunting, and that those challenges included employing skilled staff and collecting quality threat intel. 65% of the responders to this SAN study reported that they were performing some form of threat hunting in-house, and 29% of those who were not doing it already were planning to implement something within the next 12 months, although that's a lot of times what people say is that we're not doing it, but we know we should, so sometime in the next year. And of course, the major challenges to all this were finding people who could actually do threat hunting effectively. That's one of those jobs you advertise for, and you'll get tons. And I've actually sat in those interviews before and had people that were saying they could do threat hunting, which basically meant they knew how to use Google, apparently. And of course, that is not what threat hunting is. But you'd be surprised at who applies for these things. And of course, then the quality of the information becomes critical. So just to put all this in perspective, a study that showed in Q1 2020 that posting on the dark web that were advertising access to corporate networks rose by 69% over Q4 last year. So the term that they used for this measurement was access for sale, which is a common term that people search for in the dark web if they're trying to find someone selling information about their company, I guess. And that search term was just commonly associated with these kind of credential markets and things like that, and that this was a massive increase. So I did put a link to both those stories and those studies in the wiki, so if you want to check any of that stuff out. A new version of Sarwent Malware, which opens an RDP port on Windows. If you don't know this is a pretty old malware that's been around for a while. It was always a framework. So Sarwent was always a malware framework that had some tools embedded in it, and it was mostly used then to load other malwares out. So it's a kind of early framework. But like most of those frameworks that are around, somebody has repurposed it, and they're allowing it to evolve into a more sophisticated piece of malware today. They've added things like there's a command now called PowerShell, and there's an RDP command that's built into the command set that's available on the menu. That RDP command apparently, when it runs, and the article I posted, if you look at it, has got all the details of this. It adds a user. It lists all the groups and users, and this is stuff that you can do with that command. And then it also can open a firewall port in the local machine to allow RDP. So it basically automates the setup for RDP. It didn't look like, in what I saw of the code, that it did anything else, but it could easily be modded to send a phone call back home to tell them that that machine had been hacked. There was the Sentinel full report is available on there. A new approach attempts to get around the Office 365 multi-factor authentication by getting a Trojan on the system. Of course, how does this start? With phishing. But we all know phishing works, right? So there's a phishing email that says something about you're entitled to a salary bonus in like Q1 of 2019. That probably plenty of people right now are going to click on. That takes you to an Office login page that looks pretty real. But the URL on that is very complicated. So I think that the people are starting to realize that all this training against phishing is telling people to look at the URLs and read the URLs, but not very many people can look deeply into a URL. And so if the basic part of it looks okay, all that other stuff that's attached there, it has a request for an ID token and authorization code, which is sent to this domain, Office HNOC, and all that's buried in the URL. So the URL, sometimes I say URL. I'm sorry. Some people don't like me to say that. So if I say URL, it doesn't mean some guy down at the car wash. It actually means the Uniform Record Locator. But basically, everybody has been told to look at those. So the app then gets access to the Office account. It has read and mod permissions because you basically granted that when you clicked on it. And then it uses that. It's the same thing I talked about last week, that Microsoft Graph CVE that's been around since it's ancient. That attack allows it to exchange the auth code that it got for an access token. And once it does that, it can actually supersede the multi-factor authentication, apparently. So I put a whole article up that you can read about it. Essentially, these tokens can be used in the place of MFA. These are all around that Zero Auth 2 and OIDC compromised in Microsoft Graph that is really, really old. And phishing always works. Somebody's going to go for it. A Dutch grandmother is in court because she refused to remove Facebook and Pinterest photos of her grandchildren. So a district court in the Netherlands ruled that she had violated the GDPR by posting pictures of minors under 16 without the permission of their legal guardians. And I guess apparently this was like a family court thing, and she's fighting with the parents of the grandchildren, and on and on and on, that kind of stuff. She was warned that she was going to be fined €50 a day if she refused to remove the pics. This is the first known case I've seen of like family court stuff spilling into like a worldwide privacy issue, but it probably isn't going to be the last. It does provide some hope for everybody that GDPR privacy laws may set some precedents that might assist in revenge porn cases and things like that, or child pornography cases. But it was quite an interesting case if you want to read about it. And then, as a member of one of the most successful hip-hop acts in Utah in the early 2000s, he brought thug life to the desert. It's Jason Wood talking about eBay port scanning. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Doug, how are you?
I'm fine.
I never know what to expect.
Well, you got to give you a good introduction there. That's one of the key,
that's hilarious.
The key things here on Security Weekly News.
I'm just amazed you come up with this stuff. All right. So with that wonderful introduction, this is going to go into, this article kind of goes into, hey, wait a minute, you've gone way too far.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah. So, and I find this slightly ironic. Doug just talks about a grandma being fined for posting pictures of her grandkids, and yet this is okay, apparently legally. Basically, this is about eBay and some of the security services that they, or anti-fraud rather, services that they use on their site, and that it, in my opinion, is really pushing it. Now, eBay is obviously going to be worried about fraud. I mean, that's key to using their platform. The users have to trust that everything's going to be okay, that they're going to get their product and stuff like that, and not be ripped off. However, like I said, this seems to be a little bit much. A security researcher named Charles Belmer spotted activity on eBay that basically performs port scans against local hosts using JavaScript. Belmer had originally had heard about this in the past, and he got a little bit of a tip that eBay had this up and running. So he went ahead and started looking at it. Now, when he started, he logged into or connected to eBay using his normal daily driver host, which runs Linux, and he didn't see anything unusual at all. So he thought, well, maybe this requires that I run on a Windows host, not Linux. And we'll try that. So he fires up a Windows VM, connects to eBay, has his monitoring going on, and sure enough, he sees some JavaScript fire off, making WebSocket requests to local hosts for common hosts associated with remote access. These are applications like RDP, VNC, varying types, X Windows, AMI admin, and some other tools that might be running on the system. All of them seem to be pretty much geared towards the idea of remote access. And he thought this was a little bit unusual. He wrote that up and published it. And the Register picked this up, which is where I ran into it. And they followed up with some additional investigation and information to his post, which I thought was kind of interesting. Normally a news article has less information and the original post has a lot more, but in this case we got some new stuff from the Register. Regardless, what's going on is that the JavaScript is coming from a company named Threat Matrix, which is a subsidiary of LexisNexis and their fraud arm. And the Register got into what data is being sent back to the company, but this basically includes port scan results from the JavaScript, your public IP address, and some other data points that the person they had looking at it wasn't exactly sure of what they meant and what was going on. I think there was some user agent information as well. And my first reaction when I look at this is, wait a minute, is this even legal? I mean, because I haven't given eBay any permission to port scan me or Threat Matrix, whoever. And the answer is, well, maybe. It kind of depends. There was a case or an instance where a bank in the UK used this service, and they came back and they're lawyered up basically and claiming that this was totally legal based on their requirements for fraud detection and things like that. Whether it's legal or not, to me, this seems really intrusive, and I have no idea why finding out whether or not somebody's running RDP or not is going to help prevent fraud. Now, the Register article is quick to point out that eBay does not appear to be doing anything with this data. They're not using the scan results to really interact with the endpoint system differently. But shouldn't there be some boundaries here on what companies are willing and allowed to do, even when they're checking for signs of fraud? That's kind of my point of view. I think there really should be somebody should stand up in those companies and say, wait a minute, we're doing what? Why are we doing this, and what are we getting out of this? Isn't there a boundary we're crossing here? In all the security training that I have taught and that I've been in as a student, we always talk about the idea of getting permission to, even when we get into silly stuff like, or, low benign kind of stuff like port scanning, and making sure that we're authorized to do that. And we always emphasize getting written permission as well, because we don't want somebody coming after us and saying we were doing something malicious that we didn't have permission for. But in this case, really, I've given no permission to eBay to do a port scan of my computer just by visiting their site. Now, I'm sure a lawyer will respond back and say that somewhere in eBay's terms of service, there is a clause in here that says just by visiting the site, I've given them that permission. But realistically, whether or not it makes it legal or not, most folks aren't going to know where the terms of service is or even what it is. And few folks knew that this was even happening at all. I'm really not a fan of this. I find this to be really kind of dodgy, whether or not it's legal. I understand the idea of needing to prevent fraud. I think we all do. We all work in the security field. Fraud is an issue that we're all going to be concerned about, and preventing criminal activity. But I think, again, there are limits that should be put in place based on what companies are allowed to do to ensure the security of their platform. Running a port scan is not remotely dangerous, right? Just checking to see that it's there. But I just find it totally unreasonable. I'd be interested to see what you guys think. You may decide that sites that perform this site, you may decide to use sites that perform this type of activity because the benefit you derive from it is sufficient enough for you to go ahead and proceed. And that's fine, as long as you're aware that it's occurring. And that's one of my issues, just the fact that folks are totally unaware of it. And finally, to wrap this up, eBay did respond to a request for information for comment from the register. And this is what they said, and I quote, eBay is committed to creating an experience on our sites and services that is safe, secure, and trustworthy, period, end quote. In other words, they gave a non-answer as to why they did this, but at least they've replied to the email from the reporter. Whatever.
Or it was a bot.
Yeah. Or it's a bot.
Yeah.
Anyhow, be aware of it. It may be concerning to you, and I think, it's worth taking a look at.
All right. Well, thanks, Jason. If you've never seen the episode of South Park called Human Centipede, you might want to, if you're not easily offended, you might want to check that out. It's essentially where you sign, because you click the user agreement on your iPad, that you gave Apple the right to sew you into a human centipede. So, yeah, it's a little ridiculous, but, it's South Park. What are you going to do? All right. And finally, rogue drones in Queens. Well, drones are everywhere. And these days with the virus and all this, it seems like, there's drones doing all kinds of stuff. You see a news story every day about somebody using a drone somehow. There was a drone called the Anti-COVID-19 Volunteer Drone Task Force, which was flying over Queens in April, ordering people to maintain separation and basically accosting people flying up and down the road. But everybody is using drones now. I mean, there's all kinds of regs in the United States about them. They're covered by the FAA. You have to have a license, et cetera. And of course, it's one of those things very difficult to enforce because it's hard to see where the drone operator actually is. But EMI, suppliers using drones to fly in everything from medical supplies in Africa to COVID tests in the UK are being delivered by drone. I don't know where all this leads. I do know that Southern Comfort was trying to roll out a home drone delivery service of their bottles of Southern Comfort, whatever. I don't know what the hell Southern Comfort is. I've tasted it, but I don't think anybody, it's just like a secret recipe or something. That was a few years ago. I put a link to that story on there. And I know Amazon's been exploring it for deliveries and so forth. Considering that UPS has been holding a package of mine that was sent overnight, listen to this, sent overnight on the 12th of May, and it's still sitting at a UPS facility because they can't find someone to deliver it, apparently. Basically maybe they need drones, and pretty soon we'll have thousands of drones flying over us all the time, dropping rolls of toilet paper in a, just in time kind of operation. So like, I need toilet paper, poof, a roll drops into my hand from a conveniently flying overhead drone. And of course, all this leads to like drone rage and people selling products to knock drones down, and probably drones that attack other drones. And I figure as soon as there's valuable stuff on drones, there'll be, evil drones that are robbing drones and being hacked and hacking drones to fly them to you instead of where they're supposed to go. Probably like there's going to be like a whole era of drone wars or something like that. And that's the news for now in the time of plague. I'm Doug White from Roger Williams University. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Security Weekly News. I'll be back Friday with the Security Weekly News wrap-up, so stay safe.